I took the job because my brother owed money to people who didn't send reminders. The ad said overnight security, container yard, Lake Superior Shore, January through March. 800 a week, cash every Friday, no questions about gaps in my resume. I called the number. A man with a voice like gravel in a can said his name was Captain Olesk and told me to meet him at the yard office on Tuesday at 6 in the evening. The drive up from Duluth took 40 minutes in snow that fell straight down through still air. The highway curved along the shoreline where the lake stretched black and frozen under a sky the color of old newspapers. I passed a shuttered bait shop and a bar with one truck in the lot, then turned onto a gravel access road marked only by a wooden sign that read Olesk Freight, no trespassing. The road ran for half a mile between walls of piled snow before opening into the yard. It was larger than I expected. Rows of shipping containers stretched in neat lines toward the waterfront, stacked 2 and sometimes 3 high, their sides streaked with rust and faded paint. Sodium lights on tall poles cast orange pools across the snow between the rows. At the far end, I could see the lake itself, a vast white plain broken by pressure ridges that looked like frozen waves. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire enclosed the entire perimeter. Near the entrance stood a small prefab building with a single lit window. I parked next to a gray pickup and walked to the door. The cold hit my lungs like inhaling broken glass. Inside, a space heater glowed red in the corner. Captain Olesk sat behind a metal desk covered with clipboards, a radio, and a thermos. He was maybe 60, with a face carved down to bone and gray hair cropped short. He wore a thick wool sweater and held a cigarette between 2 fingers. "You're early?" he said. "Good. Sit." I sat in a folding chair across from him. He studied me for a moment, then pushed a clipboard toward me. "Standard forms. Sign where the tabs are. Pay is cash, every Friday noon. You miss a shift without calling, you're done. You steal anything, you're done, and I call the sheriff. Clear?" "Clear." I filled out the forms. He didn't ask for identification. When I finished, he filed the papers in a drawer and pulled out a ring with 12 keys. "You'll work midnight to 8 in the morning, 6 nights a week. Sunday off. The yard closes to truck traffic at 10. Last driver usually leaves by 11. You lock the main gate at midnight exactly and unlock it at 8. You patrol the rows, check the perimeter fence, watch for vandals and copper thieves. You have a radio, channel 6 only. I monitor from my house. If you need me, you call. If I call you, you answer within 10 seconds. He dropped the keys on the desk between us. Office key, main gate, north gate, that one stays locked. Bathroom, equipment shed, generator room, 6 container keys for spot checks. The numbers are on the tags. The rest open utility boxes and the breaker panel. Don't lose them. I picked up the ring. The metal was cold, even through my glove. You'll bunk in the office. There's a cot in the back room, a hot plate, a space heater. Bring your own food. There's a bathroom with a sink and toilet. Water pressure is bad, but it works. You can run the heater all night, but don't touch the thermostat on the wall unit. That's for the equipment, not you. He stood and walked to a filing cabinet, then came back with a laminated sheet of paper and a flashlight with a yellow body and a heavy rubber grip. This is yours. Maglite, 4D cells. There are spare batteries in the shed, second shelf. Check the beam at the start of every shift. If it flickers, replace the batteries before you start patrol. He set the flashlight on the desk, then tapped the laminated sheet. These are the rules. You follow them exactly. You don't improvise, you don't second guess. You don't call me at 3 in the morning asking if you can bend one. You follow them or you leave. Understood? Understood. He slid the sheet across the desk. I looked down at 11 numbered rules typed in capital letters. Container Yard Night Patrol. Regulations 1. Lock the main gate at midnight exactly. Set your watch to the office clock before every shift. Do not lock early. Do not lock late. 2. Begin your first patrol at 12:15 a.m. Walk the outer perimeter fence clockwise, starting at the northeast corner. Complete the circuit in 35 minutes. Return to the office by 12:55 a.m. 3. Do not enter row J, marked with yellow posts at both ends. Do not shine your light down row J. If you hear sounds from row J, continue your patrol without stopping. 4. At 1:30 a.m., check the generator room. The diesel gauge should read between 3/4 and full. If it reads below 3/4, radio the captain immediately. Do not attempt to refuel the generator yourself. 5. If you see someone in the yard after midnight, shine your light on them and ask their business. If they are wearing a reflective vest with the Olesk Freight logo, they are authorized. If they are not wearing this vest, order them to leave by the main gate and radio the captain. Do not approach them. 6. Between 2:15 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., the ice on the lake sometimes makes loud cracking sounds. Ignore these sounds. Do not walk to the waterfront to investigate. Do not radio the captain about ice sounds. 7. At 3 a.m., begin your second patrol. Walk the interior rows south to north, starting with row A. Check that container doors are secured. Shine your light into the gaps between stacks. Complete all rows except row J by 4:30 a.m. 8. If a container door is open that was closed on your previous check, radio the captain before approaching. Wait for instructions. Do not close the door yourself. 9. At 5 a.m., check the equipment shed. Count the spare batteries, should be 12, the road flares should be 6, and the coils of chain should be 4. If any count is wrong, radio the captain. Do not take any equipment except batteries for your flashlight. 10. If you see a woman in a blue coat walking along the fence line, do not speak to her. She will not respond. She will not look at you. Continue your patrol. She will be gone within 10 minutes. 11. Do not use the north gate for any reason. It will remain locked at all times. If you hear knocking on the north gate, check that the office windows facing north are covered with the blinds pulled fully down. Do not look through the blinds. Wait in the office until the knocking stops. I read through the list twice. Captain Olesk watched me, his cigarette burning down between his fingers. Questions? He said. Row J. I said, what's in it? Containers. Why can't I go in there? Because the rules say you can't. He crushed his cigarette in a metal ashtray. Anything else? I wanted to ask about the woman in the blue coat. I wanted to ask what made the knocking at the north gate. Instead, I said, what happens if I break a rule? He leaned back in his chair. You'll know. That's not an answer. It's the only one you get. He stood and pulled on a heavy canvas jacket. Your first shift starts tonight. Get here by 11:30 to settle in. Bring enough food for a week. There's no place to buy anything within 20 miles. Any other questions, ask them now. The radio, I said. Channel 6 only? Channel 6. I check in at 0100, 0300, and 0600. You acknowledge with your name and the current time. If I don't hear from you, I come out here. If you don't answer the radio at all, I call the sheriff and tell him someone's trespassing on my property. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the knob. One more thing. You'll see things that don't make sense out here. You'll hear things. You'll want explanations. Don't waste time looking for them. Just follow the rules and collect your pay. People who do that last the season. People who don't are gone by the end of the first week. He left. I heard his truck start, then the crunch of tires on gravel fading toward the highway. I sat in the folding chair and looked at the laminated rules sheet under the fluorescent light. Outside the window, the container rows stood in their orange-lit silence. The wind had picked up. I could hear it hissing through the gaps between the containers, a sound like distant breathing. I drove back to Duluth, bought groceries, and returned to the yard at 11:25 that night. The thermometer on my dashboard read 8 degrees. The sky was clear and full of stars that seemed too bright, like chips of ice reflecting light from nowhere. Captain Olesk's truck was parked by the office. He met me at the door and handed me the key ring, the flashlight, and a two-way radio in a nylon belt holster. "Channel 6 is already set," he said. "There's a charger in the office. Keep it plugged in when you're not on patrol. Battery lasts 6 hours at full charge." He showed me the back room. A cot with a wool blanket, a card table, 2 folding chairs, and a dorm-sized refrigerator that hummed loudly. The bathroom was a closet with a toilet and a rust-stained sink. The space heater was the kind you see in cheap motels, with a fan that rattled when it ran. "Thermostat on the main room wall unit stays at 62, he said. "That's to keep the radio equipment and the office computer from freezing. You want it warmer in the back room, use the space heater, but don't run both heaters at the same time or you'll trip the breaker." He checked his watch. 11:50, I'm leaving. You lock the main gate at midnight, not 11:59, not 12:01, midnight. "I understand. Your first radio check is at 0100, don't forget." He walked to the door, then stopped. "And don't go in row J." "I won't." He left. I heard his truck drive away. The office was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock on the wall. I set my phone to match the clock, then synced my wristwatch. 11:53. I unpacked my groceries into the refrigerator and made instant coffee on the hot plate. At 11:58, I put on my coat, gloves, and hat, then took the key ring and the flashlight and walked out to the main gate. The cold was a physical thing, a pressure that tightened around my chest. My breath came out in clouds that hung in the still air. The gate was a double section of chain link on rollers with a heavy chain and padlock. I found the right key and waited, watching the second hand on my watch crawl toward 12. At exactly midnight, I locked the gate. The click of the padlock closing sounded very loud. I tested the chain to make sure it was secure, then walked back to the office. The sodium lights cast my shadow in 3 directions at once. Between the container rows, the darkness was absolute. At 12:14, I checked the flashlight beam. It was strong and steady. I put on the radio holster and clipped it to my belt, then started my first patrol. The rules said to walk the perimeter fence clockwise, starting at the northeast corner. I found the corner where the fence met itself at right angles and began walking. The fence was 8 feet tall, the chain link tight and well-maintained. On the other side, the forest started immediately, thin birch and pine crowding close, their branches skeletal against the sky. My boots crunched in the snow. The flashlight beam swept left and right across the fence line. I checked my watch every 5 minutes to keep pace. The perimeter was longer than it looked from the office. The fence ran straight for what felt like a quarter mile, then turned 90 degrees and ran parallel to the lake. I could see the waterfront now, the white expanse of ice stretching toward a horizon that bled darkness into darker blue. The pressure ridges looked like the spine of something huge moving beneath the surface. At the southwest corner, the fence turned again and ran along the back edge of the yard where the container rows ended. This was the side closest to the lake. The wind was stronger here, coming off the ice with a sound like low static. I kept the flashlight aimed at the fence and walked. I heard the first sound at 12:38. It came from somewhere to my left between the container rows, a scraping noise, metal on metal, drawn out and slow. I stopped and turned, shining the light toward the rows. The beam reached maybe 50 yards, illuminating the sides of containers stacked 3 high. The names of shipping companies were stenciled in faded letters. Maersk, Evergreen, Costco. Some containers had numbers spray-painted on their doors. I saw row markers, wooden posts with letters burned into them. Row F, row G, row H. The scraping stopped. I waited, listening. Nothing. I checked the rules sheet folded in my pocket. If you hear sounds from row J, continue your patrol without stopping. This wasn't row J. This was somewhere around row G or H. The rules didn't say what to do about sounds from other rows. I started walking again. The sound didn't repeat. At 12:52, I completed the circuit and returned to the office. I made a note in the logbook on the desk. First patrol complete, perimeter secure, no issues. At 1 o'clock, the radio crackled. Night patrol, this is Captain. Radio check. I pressed the transmit button. This is Brennan. Time is 0100. Acknowledged. Generator check at 0130. Understood. The radio went silent. I drank cold coffee and watched the clock. At 1:28, I took the flashlight and the generator room key and walked to the small cinder-block building behind the office. The generator was a big industrial caterpillar that rumbled steadily, its vibration humming through the floor. I found the diesel gauge on the side panel. The needle pointed to just above 3/4. I made a note in my head and left. Back in the office, I logged the generator check, 1:35. The rules said the next patrol started at 3. I had time to sit, but I was too wired with cold and adrenaline. I paced the office, looking out the windows at the container rows. The sodium lights threw hard shadows. I tried to count the rows from where I stood, but lost track around row N. At 2:18, I heard the ice crack. It wasn't a single crack. It was a series of deep booms that rolled across the frozen lake like distant artillery. I went to the window and looked toward the waterfront. The pressure ridges stood silent and still. The sound came again. 3 sharp reports followed by a long groan that seemed to come from beneath the ice itself. I looked at the rules sheet. Between 2:15 a.m. and 2:30 a.m., the ice on the lake sometimes makes loud cracking sounds. Ignore these sounds. Do not walk to the waterfront to investigate. Do not radio the captain about ice sounds. I ignored the sounds. They continued for another 6 minutes. Booms and groans and sharp cracks like someone firing a rifle into a frozen pond. At 2:27, they stopped. The silence afterward felt heavier than the sounds themselves. At 3 o'clock, I started the second patrol. The interior rows ran south to north in alphabetical order. Row A was closest to the office. I walked down the gap between row A and row B, shining my flashlight on the container doors as I passed. Each door had a vertical locking bar secured with a padlock or a twist lock. I checked each one, all secure. The rows were long, maybe 150 yards from south to north. The containers were stacked 2 high in most places, 3 high where the ground allowed. The gaps between stacks were narrow, just wide enough for a person to walk through sideways. I shone my light into each gap as I passed. Empty. Just snow and frozen mud. I finished row A at 3:22 and moved to row B. The pattern was the same. Check the doors, check the gaps, keep moving. My breath fogged in the flashlight beam. The cold had settled into my bones. I could no longer feel my toes inside my boots. At 3:40, I reached row 1. The row marker was a wooden post with the letter I burned into it, planted at the south entrance. I walked down the row, checking doors. Halfway up, I found a container with a door that hung slightly open, maybe an inch of black gap showing between the door and the frame. I stopped and looked at the rules sheet. If a container door is open that was closed on your previous check, radio the captain before approaching. Wait for instructions. Do not close the door yourself. This was my first night. I hadn't done a previous check. I didn't know if the door had been open before or not. I stepped closer and shone the flashlight at the gap. The beam showed only darkness inside. No contents visible, no sounds. I pulled out the radio. Captain, this is Brennan. I have a container door open in row Y, requesting instructions. Static. Then his voice, heavy with sleep. How far open? About an inch. Shine your light inside. Tell me what you see. I stepped up to the door and angled the flashlight beam through the gap. The interior was empty, bare metal walls, a few wooden pallets stacked in the corner, nothing else. Empty, I said. Just pallets. Mark the container number. Check it again on your next patrol. If it's open wider, call me. Otherwise, leave it alone. Understood. I found the number stenciled on the door. I-47. I wrote it in my notepad and moved on. At 4:10, I reached the entrance to row J. The row marker was a wooden post painted yellow. A chain hung across the entrance with a sign that read, "No entry. Captain authorization only." I stopped and looked down the row. It was no different from the others, containers stacked too high, gaps between them, snow on the ground. The sodium lights reached into it just like they reached into every other row. I heard something. A low sound, rhythmic, almost like breathing. It came from somewhere deep in row J, past where the light reached. I stood at the entrance and listened. The sound continued. Slow, steady, like an engine idling or a ventilation fan turning. The rules said not to enter row J. They said not to shine my light down row J. They said if I heard sounds from row J, I should continue my patrol without stopping. I turned and walked away. The sound faded behind me. I finished the patrol at 4:28 and returned to the office. I logged the door in row 1 and the sound in row J, then sat at the desk and drank coffee that had gone cold. My hands shook when I lifted the cup. I told myself it was just the cold. At 5 o'clock, I checked the equipment shed. The shed was a wooden structure next to the generator room secured with a heavy padlock. Inside, metal shelves held supplies, batteries, road flares, coils of chain, tarps, a shovel, a pry bar. I counted the batteries on the second shelf, 12, still in their packaging. I counted the road flares on the third shelf, 6, red cylinders with striking caps. I counted the coils of chain hanging on hooks by the door. 4. Everything matched the rules. I locked the shed and went back to the office. At 6 o'clock, the radio crackled. "Night Patrol, this is Captain, radio check. This is Brennan, time is 0600. Generator check at 05? I realized I'd forgotten the 5 a.m. equipment check was also the time for a generator check. I walked quickly to the generator room and checked the gauge, 3/4, same as before. I keyed the radio. Generator at 3/4, equipment shed inventory correct. Acknowledged. Sunrise at 0740, stay inside after 0700. Morning truck traffic starts at 0815. You unlock the main gate at 0800 exactly and then you're done. Understood. The sky began to lighten around 7. I sat in the office back room with the space heater running and ate a granola bar that tasted like cardboard. My shift ended at 8. I would unlock the gate, hand the keys and radio to Captain Olesk when he arrived, then drive back to my apartment and sleep until evening. At 7:55, I turned off the space heater and put on my coat. At 7:59, I walked out to the main gate with the key ring in my gloved hand. The sky was the color of steel. The wind had died. The container rows stood silent. At exactly 8 o'clock, I unlocked the gate. Captain Olesk arrived 10 minutes later. He parked his truck, walked to the office, and took the keys and radio from me without a word. He looked at the logbook, flipped through the pages, then looked at me. "The door in row 1, he said. "You check it on your second patrol?" "No, sir, that was my first patrol of the interior rows." "Check it tonight. If it's open wider, you call me." "I will." "Row J, you hear the sound?" "Yes." "You go in there?" "No." He nodded. "Good, get some sleep. See you at 11:30 tonight." I drove back to Duluth through morning light that felt too bright. I slept until 6 in the evening, ate dinner, then drove back to the yard. The routine began again. The first week passed in a rhythm of cold and darkness and the slow circuits of my patrol. I locked the gate at midnight. I walked the perimeter fence in 35 minutes. I checked the generator at 1:30. I ignored the ice sounds between 2:15 and 2:30. I walked the interior rows starting at 3, checking doors and shining my light into gaps. I checked the equipment shed at 5. I unlocked the gate at 8. The door in row Y stayed open an inch. I checked it every night. It never moved. I heard the sound from row J every night during my interior patrol. It was always the same, a low rhythmic breathing that seemed to come from deep inside the row. I never stopped to listen. I never shone my light down the row. I followed the rules. On the 4th night, I saw the woman in the blue coat. It was 3:42 in the morning. I was walking the perimeter fence on my second patrol, moving along the west side near the forest edge. I saw her ahead of me, maybe 70 yards away, walking slowly along the fence line. She wore a long blue coat that reached to her knees and a dark hat pulled down over her ears. Her hands were in her pockets. She walked with her head down, not looking at the yard or the fence or anything. I stopped and pulled out the rules sheet. If you see a woman in a blue coat walking along the fence line, do not speak to her. She will not respond. She will not look at you. Continue your patrol. She will be gone within 10 minutes. I folded the sheet and kept walking. The woman was 50 yards ahead now, still moving along the fence. I kept my distance and my pace. She walked like someone going nowhere in particular, slow and steady. I could see her breath in the cold air, a faint mist rising from the shadow of her hat. At 3:49, I checked my watch. 7 minutes. I looked up. The woman was gone. I swept my flashlight along the fence line. No one. No footprints in the snow except my own. I stood there for a moment, then continued my patrol. When I returned to the office, I logged it. Woman in blue coat observed at 03:42. No interaction. Disappeared after 7 minutes. Captain Olesk read the entry the next morning. You keep your distance? Yes. Good. He didn't say anything else. On the 6th night, I heard the knocking at the north gate. It started at 2:48 in the morning. I was sitting in the office waiting for my 3 o'clock patrol when I heard it. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and heavy, like someone hitting the gate with the flat of their hand. The sound was muffled by distance but clear. I stood and listened. The knocking came again. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. I pulled out the rule sheet. If you hear knocking on the north gate, check that the office windows facing north are covered with the blinds pulled fully down. Do not look through the blinds. Wait in the office until the knocking stops. I walked to the north-facing windows. There were 2 of them, each with vinyl blinds. Both blinds were up. I could see out across the yard toward the north fence and the north gate, a chain-link gate identical to the main gate but smaller, just wide enough for a person to pass through on foot. The sodium lights reached part way there, but not all the way. The gate itself was lost in shadow. The knocking came again. I pulled the first blind down until it covered the window completely, then moved to the second window and did the same. The knocking continued. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more knocks. I sat at the desk and waited. The knocking went on for 11 minutes. I timed it. At 2:59, it stopped. I waited another 5 minutes, then raised 1 blind slightly and looked out. The north gate was visible now in the indirect light from the nearest sodium lamp. No one was there. The gate was closed and locked, the chain intact. I started my 3 o'clock patrol. When I returned, I logged the incident. Knocking at north gate at 02:48. Blinds lowered per regulations. Knocking ceased at 02:59. No visual confirmation of source. Captain Olesk read it the next morning and said nothing. The second week began. The cold deepened. The thermometer outside the office read 2 degrees at midnight, 0 by 3, -4 by dawn. The wind came off the lake in gusts that made the container walls boom like drums. I wore 2 pairs of gloves and a balaclava under my hat. My breath froze in the fabric. On the 8th night, I found the second open door. It was in row D, container D23. The door was open about 6 inches, the locking bar hanging loose on one hinge. I stopped and radioed the captain. "This is Brennan. Container door open in row D, number D23. Door is open 6 inches. Previous patrols showed it closed." Static. Then his voice, sharp and awake. "Do not approach. I'm coming out." "Understood." I waited. The wind hissed through the gaps between containers. I kept my flashlight aimed at the open door. The gap showed only darkness inside. Captain Olesk arrived in 18 minutes. He parked his truck by the office and walked to row D carrying a heavy spotlight with a pistol grip. He shone the light through the open door, then pushed it wider with his boot. "Empty," he said. He stepped inside, swept the spotlight around the interior, then came out. He pulled the door closed and secured the locking bar with a twist lock from his pocket. "Check it every patrol. If it opens again, call me immediately." "What's opening them?" He looked at me. "Keep your log accurate. That's all you need to worry about." He left. I continued my patrol. Container D23 stayed closed for the rest of the night. On the 10th night, I heard voices in row J. It was 3:25 in the morning, halfway through my interior patrol. I was walking past the entrance to row J when I heard them, low voices, 2 or maybe 3 people talking. The words were indistinct, but the rhythm was conversational, like a discussion between workers. I stopped and listened. The voices continued. I heard a laugh, brief and rough. The rules said not to enter row J. They said not to shine my light down row J. They said if I heard sounds from row J, I should continue my patrol without stopping. I continued my patrol. When I returned to the office, I logged it. Voices heard from row J at 03:25. Multiple speakers, did not investigate per regulations. Captain Olesk read the entry the next morning. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "You ever recognize any of the voices?" "No." "Good, don't try to." On the 13th night, the generator gauge read half full. I was doing my 130 generator check when I saw the needle pointing to the halfway mark. The rules said to radio the captain immediately if the gauge read below 3/4. I pulled out the radio. "Captain, this is Brennan. Generator diesel gauge reading 1/2 at 0130. Long static. Then his voice, tired. "Do not refuel. I'll handle it in the morning. Monitor the gauge every hour. If it drops to 1/4, call me immediately." "Understood." I checked the gauge every hour for the rest of the shift. It stayed at half. The generator kept running. At 8 in the morning, a fuel truck arrived. Captain Olesk supervised while the driver refilled the diesel tank. He didn't explain why the level had dropped. On the 14th night, I saw someone in the yard. It was 4:15 in the morning. I was finishing my interior patrol, walking up row M toward the north end, when I saw a figure standing between 2 containers about 40 yards ahead. The figure was man-shaped, wearing dark clothing. He stood very still, facing me. I stopped and shone my flashlight at him. The beam lit him up. He wore a reflective vest with a logo on the chest, but from this distance I couldn't read it. I called out, "This is a restricted area. State your business." He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in the flashlight beam. I walked closer, keeping the light on him. At 20 yards, I could see the vest clearly. It was reflective, but the logo wasn't Olesk Freight. The logo was a different company, something with a shield and crossed hammers. The man's face was shadowed under a knit cap. His hands hung at his sides. The rules said if someone in the yard was not wearing an Olesk Freight vest, I should order them to leave by the main gate and radio the captain. I should not approach them. I stopped at 15 yards. "You need to leave. The main gate is that way." I pointed south with my free hand. "Leave now." The figure didn't move. I'm radioing the captain, I said. I pulled out the radio, keeping my flashlight aimed at the man. I pressed the transmit button. Captain, this is Brennan. I have an unauthorized person in row M not wearing Olesk vest. Subject is not responding to orders. Static. Then Captain Olesk's voice, very calm. Describe the subject. Male. Approximately 6 feet, dark clothing, wearing a reflective vest with the wrong logo. He's just standing there. Turn off your flashlight and walk away. Do not look back. Return to the office immediately. Copy. I turned off the flashlight. The darkness was instant and total. I turned and walked south toward the office, counting my steps. I didn't look back. I didn't run. I walked at a steady pace, my hand on the radio, my breath loud in my ears. At 50 steps, I turned the flashlight back on. I was alone. I swept the beam behind me. Row M was empty. I kept walking. Back in the office, I logged the encounter. Unauthorized person in row M at 0415, male, wrong vest logo, non-responsive. Followed captain's instruction to disengage. Subject not visible upon departure. At 6 o'clock, the captain radioed. The person you saw. Which direction was he facing when you first spotted him? North. Facing me. You see his face? No. Too dark under his hat. Good. Do not go back to that section tonight. Finish your shift in the office. Understood. I stayed in the office until 8. When Captain Olesk arrived, he read my log entry twice, then looked at me. You did right, he said. You see anyone else wearing the wrong vest, you do the same. Don't talk to them. Don't try to identify them. Just walk away and call me. What was he doing there? Captain Olesk folded the logbook closed. Following his own rules. He didn't explain. On the 15th night, I found the amendments. Captain Olesk met me at 11:30 with a new laminated sheet. This one was smaller, printed in the same block capitals, labeled Amendments to Night Patrol Regulations, effective immediately. You read these before you start your shift, he said. They replace some of the original rules. Where there's a conflict, these take precedence. I read through the list while he watched. Amendments to Night Patrol Regulations A1. If container door I-47 is open more than 4 inches, do not enter row 1. Radio the captain and wait in the office. A2. Do not approach within 10 yards of the north gate between midnight and 6 a.m. If you must patrol the north perimeter fence, stay at least 15 yards from the gate at all times. A3. If you see vehicle headlights on the access road after midnight, do not unlock the main gate. Radio the captain immediately. Stay in the office with the door locked until instructed otherwise. A4. Between 3:30 a.m. and 4 a.m., the sound from row J may grow louder. If the sound becomes audible from outside row J, return to the office and wait until 4 a.m. before resuming patrol. A5. If the woman in the blue coat stops walking and turns to face you, close your eyes immediately and count to 20. Do not open your eyes until you reach 20. Continue your patrol after opening your eyes. A6. If you find a container door open in row F, row G, or row H, mark the container number and do not report it to the captain. Close the door using the twist lock on your key ring, key marked twist. Check the container on your next patrol. If it is open again, leave it open. A7 at 4:30 a.m. Check the office thermostat. If the reading is above 62 degrees, do not adjust it. If the reading is below 55 degrees, radio the captain immediately. A8. If you hear footsteps on the office roof, do not go outside to investigate. Continue normal activities. The footsteps will stop within 5 minutes. A9. Do not use your personal phone to take photographs or video of the yard, the containers, or any persons or anomalies observed during your shift. If you do, delete the files immediately. I looked up at Captain Olesk. Footsteps on the roof? You'll hear them, he said. Maybe tonight, maybe not. When you do, you ignore them. What about container doors in rows F, G, and H? Why shouldn't I report those? Because I already know about them. He took the original rules sheet from me and handed me only the amendments. Keep this in your pocket. Follow them exactly, understand? I understand. He left. I started my shift. At 12:40 during my perimeter patrol, I heard footsteps on the office roof. They were slow and deliberate, boot steps crossing from east to west. I counted them. 17 steps, then silence. I finished my patrol and returned to the office. The roof was empty when I looked up from outside. I logged the incident. Footsteps on office roof at 01240. 17 steps west traveling, no investigation per A8. At 3:55, I was approaching row J during my interior patrol when I heard the sound grow louder. The low rhythmic breathing became a deep mechanical throb like a diesel engine running at idle. The sound was loud enough that I could hear it from row 1. I checked my watch. 3:56. The amendment said to return to the office if the sound became audible outside row J and wait until 4 a.m. I walked back to the office and waited. The sound was faint from inside the office, but still present, a low vibration I felt in my chest more than heard with my ears. At exactly 4 a.m., it stopped. I resumed my patrol. At 4:18, I found an open door in row G, container G34. The door was open about 3 inches. I checked the amendments. A6. If you find a container door open in row F, row G, or row H, mark the container number and do not report it to the captain. Close the door using the twist lock on your keyring. Key marked twist. Check the container on your next patrol. If it is open again, leave it open. I found the twist lock key on my ring. It was a short brass key with a square head. I pulled the container door closed, inserted the key into the twist lock mechanism and turned it 90 degrees. The lock engaged with a solid click. I marked G34 in my notepad and continued my patrol. The next night I checked G34 during my 3 a.m. patrol. The door was closed. I checked it again at 5 a.m., still closed. I logged it. Container G34 secured per A6. Door remains closed. On the 17th night, I saw the woman in the blue coat again. This time, she stopped walking and turned to face me. It was 3:32 in the morning. I was on my second perimeter patrol walking the west fence line when I saw her ahead of me. She was walking south, away from me, same blue coat and dark hat. I kept my distance and continued walking. At 3:34, she stopped. She stood still for a moment, then turned slowly to face me. I was maybe 30 yards away. I couldn't see her face under the shadow of her hat. She stood with her hands in her coat pockets, facing me directly. I remembered A5. If the woman in the blue coat stops walking and turns to face you, close your eyes immediately and count to 20. Do not open your eyes until you reach 20. I closed my eyes. I counted 1, 2, 3. My heart hammered. 4, 5, 6. The cold bit through my gloves. 7, 8, 9. I heard nothing but the wind and my own breathing. 10, 11, 12. I kept counting. 13, 14, 15. My legs wanted to run. 16, 17, 18. Almost there. 19, 20. I opened my eyes. The woman was gone. The fence line was empty. My flashlight beam showed only snow and the dark wall of trees beyond the fence. I stood for a moment, breathing hard, then continued my patrol. I logged the encounter. Woman in blue coat stopped and faced observer at 0334. Followed A5 protocol. No further contact. Captain Olesk read the entry in the morning. You count all the way to 20? Yes. Good. If she does it again, you do the same. What happens if I don't? He looked at me for a long moment. She stops being a rule and starts being a problem. The third week began. The temperature dropped to 10 below zero. The lake ice boomed and cracked every night between 2:15 and 2:30. the sounds rolling across the frozen surface like thunder. I stopped flinching at them. On the 19th night, I heard the knocking at the north gate again. This time it lasted 23 minutes. I sat in the office with the blinds down, listening to the steady rhythm. 3 knocks, silence, 3 knocks, silence. I timed the intervals. Exactly 30 seconds between each set. At 3:16, the knocking stopped. I waited 5 minutes, raised the blinds, and saw nothing at the north gate. On the 21st night, container I-47 was open 5 inches. I found it during my 3 a.m. patrol. The locking bar hung loose, the door showing a 5-inch gap. I remembered A1. If container door I-47 is open more than 4 inches, do not enter row Y. Radio the captain and wait in the office. I backed out of row Y and radioed the captain. This is Brennan. Container I-47 is open 5 inches. I'm returning to the office per A1. Acknowledged. Do not return to row Y tonight. I'll handle it tomorrow. I returned to the office and logged the incident. The next morning, Captain Olesk was waiting when I arrived to hand over the keys. His truck was parked with the engine running, a heavy chain and padlock in the bed. I-47 stays locked now, he said. You won't need to check it anymore. He drove to row Y. I watched from the office window. He pulled the container door closed and secured it with the chain and padlock, wrapping the chain through the locking bar and around the door handle multiple times. When he finished, he stood looking at the container for a long moment, then walked back to his truck and left. That night I walked past row 1 during my patrol. Container I-47 was still chained shut. It remained that way for the rest of my time at the yard. On the 23rd night, the generator gauge dropped to 1/4. I was doing my 2 a.m. generator check, an extra check I'd started doing after the earlier fuel drop, when I saw the needle pointing to the quarter mark. I radioed immediately. Captain, this is Brennan. Generator diesel at 1/4 as of 0200. A long pause, then his voice rough with sleep. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Do not touch the generator. Do not go into the generator room after I arrive. Understood? He arrived in 12 minutes. I met him outside the office. He carried a spotlight and a red fuel can from his truck. He walked to the generator room without speaking to me, went inside and closed the door. I heard the generator's pitch change, then settle back to its normal rhythm. He came out 6 minutes later, the fuel can empty. Gauge should be at half now, he said. Check it at 0400. If it's dropped again, wake me up. I don't care what time it is. Yes, sir. At 4 a.m., the gauge read half full. It stayed there for the rest of the night. On the 25th night, I saw the man in the wrong vest again. It was 4:38 in the morning. I was doing my 5 a.m. equipment shed check a few minutes early, walking across the open ground between the office and the shed, when I saw him standing beside the shed door. He wore the same dark clothing and reflective vest with the wrong logo. He stood facing the door with his back to me. I stopped 15 yards away and turned off my flashlight. I started to back away slowly, reaching for my radio. The figure turned and looked at me. I still couldn't see his face clearly in the darkness, but I saw that he was looking directly at me. He raised one hand slowly and pointed at the equipment shed door. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I pressed the transmit button on the radio and whispered, "Captain, he's here again." By the equipment shed, static, then Captain Olesk's voice, very quiet. "Is he pointing?" "Yes." "Go to the shed. Open the door. Do what you need to do for your check. Do not acknowledge him. When you're done, walk back to the office. Do not look at him again." I wanted to argue. I wanted to run. Instead, I said, "Copy." I turned my flashlight back on and walked to the equipment shed. The figure stood 3 yards to my left, his hand still pointing at the door. I could feel him watching me, but I didn't look at him. I unlocked the shed, opened the door, and stepped inside. I counted batteries. 12. I counted road flares. 6. I counted chains. 4. Everything correct. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the flashlight. I stepped out of the shed, locked the door, and walked back to the office. I didn't look left. I didn't look back. I walked at a normal pace, my jaw clenched tight to keep my teeth from chattering. Inside the office, I locked the door and looked out the window toward the shed. The figure was gone. I radioed the captain. "I'm in the office. He's gone. You do your count?" "Yes, everything correct." "Good. Log it and finish your shift. We'll talk in the morning." I logged the encounter. Figure in wrong vest observed at equipment shed at 0438. Subject pointed at shed door. Completed equipment check per captain's instruction. Subject departed, no further contact. When Captain Olesk arrived at 8, he read the entry, then sat down across from me. "That's twice now," he said. "He's showing you something both times. First time he was in row M facing north. Second time he's at the shed pointing at the door. You think about what that might mean?" "No," I said. "I've been trying not to think about any of this." "Good. Keep it that way. But if you see him a third time, I want you to note exactly where he is and what direction he's facing or pointing. Write it down the second you're somewhere safe." "Can you do that?" "Yes. He won't hurt you. That's not what he does. He just wants you to pay attention." Captain Olesk stood and put on his coat. "Get some sleep. See you tonight." On the 27th night, the amendment list was revised. Captain Olesk met me at the office with a new sheet. Amendments B1 through B4 printed on blue paper this time instead of white. Amendments to Night Patrol Regulations, Series B, B1. If you see lights moving inside any container, do not investigate. Mark the container number and row. Radio the captain only if the lights persist for more than 3 minutes. B2. Between midnight and 1 a.m., do not walk between rows A and B. Use the perimeter path or the gap between rows B and C during this time window. B3. If you hear voices calling your name from any container row, do not respond verbally. Continue your patrol. The voices will stop within 2 minutes. B4. At 5:45 a.m., verify that the office thermostat reads between 55 and 65 degrees. If it reads outside this range, adjust it to 62 degrees and radio the captain immediately. "Why can't I walk between A and B after midnight?" I asked. Captain Olesk folded his arms. "Because that's when the gap belongs to someone else." "Who?" "Doesn't matter. They'll be gone by 1 a.m. Just stay out of that gap during the first hour of your shift." That night at 12:45, I walked past the south entrance to the gap between rows A and B during my perimeter patrol. I shone my flashlight down the gap. 50 yards in, I saw a shape moving. It was low to the ground, maybe 3 feet tall, and it moved in a way that wasn't quite walking and wasn't quite crawling. The shape was dark and indistinct, like smoke given just enough substance to cast a shadow. I kept walking. I didn't look back. At 1 a.m., I checked the gap again. It was empty. On the 29th night, I heard voices calling my name. It was 3:45 in the morning during my interior patrol. I was walking through row K when I heard a voice from somewhere ahead, muffled but clear. "Brennan! Hey, Brennan!" I stopped. The voice came again from between 2 containers about 20 yards ahead. "Brennan, over here. I need to talk to you." The voice was male, rough, urgent. It sounded like someone in trouble. I remembered B3. If you hear voices calling your name from any container row, do not respond verbally. Continue your patrol. The voices will stop within 2 minutes. I walked forward without responding. The voice called again. "Brennan, wait, don't go. I need help." I kept walking. The voice followed me for another minute, growing fainter, then stopped. I checked my watch. 1 minute 40 seconds from first call to silence. I logged it. Name called from row K at 0345. Did not respond per B3. Voice ceased after 1 minute 40 seconds. On the 31st night, I saw lights moving inside a container in row E. It was 3:20 in the morning. I was walking down row E when I saw a faint glow coming from inside container E19. The glow was yellowish, flickering like candlelight. It moved across the interior of the container, visible through the narrow gap where the door met the frame. I stopped and watched. The light continued to move, left to right, then back again, then up toward the roof of the container. I checked my watch and waited. At 3 minutes and 10 seconds, the light was still moving. I radioed the captain. "Captain, this is Brennan. I have lights moving inside container E19. Duration now exceeding 3 minutes. Acknowledged. Mark the container. Do not approach. Continue your patrol." Copy. I marked E19 in my notepad. The light continued to move inside the container as I walked away. I checked E19 on my next patrol at 5 a.m. The container was dark. No light, no sounds. The door was locked tight. Captain Olesk asked me about it the next morning. The light. What color was it? Yellow. Like a candle or a lantern. It move in a pattern or random? Random, I think. It swept back and forth, then up. He made a note in his own small notebook. E19, I'll check it later. You did right. On the 34th night, the ice sounds changed. It was 2:22 in the morning. The usual booms and cracks were rolling across the lake, the deep sounds I'd learned to ignore, but then I heard something else. A long scraping sound, metal on ice, followed by a series of sharp impacts like someone hammering on metal. The sounds came from the direction of the waterfront. I looked at the rules. They said to ignore ice sounds between 2:15 and 2:30. They didn't say anything about metal sounds mixed with the ice sounds. I stood at the office window and listened. The scraping came again, closer this time, followed by more hammering. I stayed in the office. At 2:31, the sounds stopped. I walked out and looked toward the waterfront. The pressure ridges stood silent under the stars. I saw no movement, no lights. Whatever had made the sounds was gone or still. I logged it. Ice sounds between 02:15 and 02:31 included metal scraping and impacts. Possibly from waterfront area. No visual confirmation of source. Captain Olesk read the entry and frowned. "You go down to the waterfront?" "No, sir." "Good, don't. Not during your shift, not ever. The waterfront is off limits after dark. That's not in the rules." "It is now. Consider it B5. Do not approach the waterfront between sunset and sunrise." He looked at me. "You hear those sounds again, you stay in the office until they stop. Understand?" "Yes." On the 36th night, I saw the third appearance of the man in the wrong vest. It was 4:53 in the morning. I was walking back to the office after my equipment shed check when I saw him standing at the south entrance to row J. He wore the same dark clothes and wrong vest. He stood facing the row, his back to me, one hand raised and pointing down row J toward the yellow chain and the no entry sign. I stopped and pulled out my notepad. I wrote, "Subject at row J south entrance, facing north into row, pointing down row J." Time 04:53, I looked up. The figure was still there, arm extended, pointing. I watched for 10 seconds, then walked to the office without taking my eyes off him for long. He didn't move. He didn't turn. He just stood there pointing into row J inside the office. I radioed the captain. "He's here again. Row J south entrance, pointing down the row." Long silence. Then, "You write down the details?" "Yes, location, direction, time." "Good. Stay in the office until your shift ends. Do not go near row J." "Understood." I stayed in the office. At 5:30, I looked out the window toward row J. The figure was gone. At 8 a.m., I gave Captain Olesk my notepad with the description. He read it carefully, then copied the details into his own notebook. 3 times now, he said. Row M facing north. Equipment shed pointing at the door. Row J pointing down the row. You see a pattern? He's showing me something in those places. Maybe. Or he's warning you away from them. Captain Olesk closed his notebook. Either way, you don't go looking. You follow the rules and let me handle the rest. On the 38th night, I found a container door open in row H, container H12. The door hung open about 2 inches. I checked amendment A6. If you find a container door open in row F, row G, or row H, mark the container number and do not report it to the captain. Close the door using the twist lock on your key ring. Check the container on your next patrol. If it is open again, leave it open. I closed the door with the twist lock key and marked H12 in my notepad. The next patrol, the door was open again. 3 inches this time. I left it open per the amendment. The following patrol, it was open 6 inches. I left it alone. By the end of the shift, the door hung open almost a foot. I logged it. Container H12 door progressively opening throughout shift. Final width approximately 12 inches, left open per A6. Captain Olesk read the entry and nodded. H12, I know that one. Leave it alone. It'll close itself by tomorrow night. He was right. The next night, H12 was closed and locked tight. I checked it every patrol for the next 3 nights. It never opened again. On the 41st night, I heard footsteps circling the office. It was 1:47 in the morning. I was sitting at the desk filling out the logbook when I heard them. Slow footsteps in the snow walking around the perimeter of the office building. I stood and listened. The footsteps were evenly paced, deliberate. They started at the north side of the building, moved to the east, then south, then west. A complete circuit. Then they started again. I checked the amendments. Nothing about circling footsteps. I checked the original rules. Nothing. This was new. The footsteps completed a second circuit, then a third. I stood at the window and looked out, but I couldn't see anyone. The footsteps were clear and close, like someone walking just outside the wall, but no one was visible. At 1:53, the footsteps stopped. I logged it. Footsteps circling office building between 01:47 and 01:53. 3 complete circuits. No visible subject. Duration 6 minutes. The captain radioed at 3 a.m. for the routine check. I told him about the circling footsteps. How many circuits? He asked. 3. Always stop at 3? Yes. Good. If they start again, count them. If they get past 5 circuits, radio me immediately. What happens at 5? You radio me, he said, and ended the transmission. The footsteps came again on the 43rd night. 3 circuits, just like before. They came again on the 45th night. Still 3 circuits. I logged each occurrence. Captain Olesk read the entries without comment. On the 47th night, I found the emergency protocols. Captain Olesk met me at 11:30 with a red laminated sheet. This one was larger than the amendments, printed in bold capitals with a header that read Emergency Protocols. For use during blackout or prolonged power failure only. Weather Service says there's a storm coming through tomorrow night, he said. Heavy snow, high winds, could knock out power to the yard. If that happens, these protocols take over. You read them now and you memorize them. I read the sheet while he waited. Emergency Protocols. Blackout Conditions E1. If main power fails, the generator will automatically engage. You will hear it throttle up within 30 seconds. If the generator does not engage within 2 minutes, radio the captain immediately. E2. During blackout conditions, do not leave the office except to check the generator, E3, or to complete the mandatory 3 a.m. abbreviated patrol, E4. All other patrols are suspended until power is restored. E3, check the generator every 60 minutes during blackout. Use the flashlight. Do not stay in the generator room longer than 90 seconds. If the generator shows signs of failing, unusual sounds, heavy vibration, smoke, radio the captain immediately and return to the office. E4. At 3 a.m., if power has not been restored, complete an abbreviated patrol. Office to main gate to office. Walk the perimeter road only. Do not enter the container rows. Verify the main gate is still locked. Return to the office within 15 minutes. E5. During blackout conditions, Row J restrictions are elevated. Do not approach within 50 yards of either Row J entrance. If you hear sounds from Row J during blackout, they will be significantly louder. Remain in the office. Storm hits tomorrow night, Captain Olesk said. Might not be a big deal, might be. Either way, you follow these protocols if the power goes out. Understood? Yes. E4 is the important one. If you do that 3 a.m. patrol, you stay on the perimeter road. You do not cut through the rows to save time. You walk the long way around. Why? Because the rows aren't safe during a blackout. Things move in there when the lights go out. Things that follow the rules when the lights are on, but don't when they're not. He left. I spent the next hour memorizing the emergency protocols. The storm arrived the following night at 11:56, 4 minutes before my shift started. The snow came in sideways on a wind that howled like something dying. I locked the main gate at midnight in near whiteout conditions, my flashlight beam swallowed by the swirling snow after 6 feet. The temperature had dropped to 15 below. The wind chill was worse. At 12:17, the power failed. The sodium lights went out all at once, plunging the yard into absolute darkness. I was in the office, standing at the window when it happened. For a moment, the only light was my flashlight beam. Then I heard the generator throttle up, a deep rumble that climbed in pitch. 30 seconds later, the office lights flickered and came back on. The sodium lights outside stayed dark. I radioed the captain. "This is Brennan. Main power is down. Generator engaged. Office power restored, but yard lights are out." Acknowledged. Generator should keep the office running. Yard lights are on a different circuit. They'll stay dark until main power comes back. Follow the emergency protocols. I'm monitoring. Copy. I checked my watch. 12:19. Under E2, I was not to leave the office except for generator checks and the 3 a.m. abbreviated patrol. I sat at the desk and listened to the wind hammer the building. The space heater glowed in the corner. The office was an island of light in an ocean of howling black. At 1:19, I did my first generator check under blackout conditions. I put on my coat and gloves, took the flashlight and the generator room key and stepped outside. The cold hit like a fist. The wind nearly knocked me down. I bent into it and walked to the generator building 20 yards from the office. The snow was already ankle deep. I unlocked the generator room and stepped inside. The generator roared, filling the small space with noise and diesel heat. I checked the gauge, 3/4 full. I checked the vibration level, normal. No smoke, no unusual sounds. I noted the time and left, locking the door behind me. Back in the office, I logged the check. Generator check at 01:19. Status normal, gauge at 3/4. At 2:19, I did the second generator check. Same routine, same result. The storm was still raging. The wind howled through the gaps between the containers with a sound like air raid sirens. At 3 a.m., I prepared for the abbreviated patrol. I put on every layer I had. 2 pairs of gloves, balaclava, hat, insulated coat, wool socks doubled inside my boots. I checked the flashlight batteries, full charge. I clipped the radio to my belt. I reviewed E4 one more time. Office to main gate to office. Walk the perimeter road only. Do not enter the container rows. Verify the main gate is still locked. Return within 15 minutes. I stepped outside at 3:02. The storm had worsened. The wind was a physical wall that pushed me backward. The snow was halfway up my shins. I turned on the flashlight and started walking along the perimeter road toward the main gate. The beam reached maybe 10 feet before the snow swallowed it. I kept the fence on my left as a guide. The darkness was total beyond my flashlight beam. The container rows were invisible on my right, just vast black spaces between me and where the sodium lights should have been. I heard the wind screaming through the rows, and underneath it other sounds, metal groaning, something heavy scraping, a low rhythmic boom that might have been containers shifting or might have been something else. I reached the main gate at 3:07. The gate was locked, the chain secure, covered in a thick layer of ice. I tested it with my gloved hand. Solid. I turned and started walking back toward the office. That's when I heard the sound from row J. It was the same low breathing I'd heard on every shift, but louder, much louder, like E5 had warned. It was a deep mechanical throb that I felt in my chest, vibrating through the frozen ground. The sound was directly to my right, maybe 40 yards away where row J should be. I remembered the protocol. If you hear sounds from row J during blackout, they will be significantly louder. Remain in the office. But I wasn't in the office. I was halfway back on the perimeter road. I kept walking faster now, my flashlight beam jerking with each step. The sound from row J grew louder. It was following me, pacing me, staying parallel to my position on the road. I heard something else beneath it, a scraping sound, metal on frozen ground, getting closer. I didn't run. Running in this snow would mean falling, and falling might mean not getting up before something reached me. I walked as fast as the snow allowed, counting my steps, 40, 50, 60. The office lights were visible now, a yellow glow through the storm. The sound from row J stopped. I kept walking, 80 steps, 90. I reached the office door at 3:13, yanked it open, stepped inside, and slammed it behind me. I locked it and stood with my back against the door, breathing hard, my heart hammering. The radio crackled. "Brennan, status." I pressed the transmit button with a shaking hand. "I'm in the office. Patrol complete. Gate secure." "You hear row J?" "Yes, it followed me." "Did you enter the rows?" "No, stayed on the perimeter road." "Good. Stay in the office until I call you. Generator check at 0400, otherwise don't go out." "Copy." I sat at the desk and logged the patrol. Abbreviated blackout patrol completed at 0313, main gate secure. Row J auditory activity elevated during return transit. Stayed on perimeter road per E4. No entries into container rows. At 400 I did another generator check. The storm was still raging. The generator was still running normally. I made it back to the office in 90 seconds. At 500, the main power came back. The sodium lights flickered and came on all at once, casting their orange glow across the snow-buried container rows. The generator throttled down. The wind was dying. I looked out the office window at the yard. Everything looked normal. Containers standing in neat rows, snow piled against their sides, the fence intact. But something was wrong. I counted the row markers visible from the office window. Row A, row B, row C, row D, row E, row F, row G, row H, row I, row K, row J's marker was missing. I pulled out my notepad and drew a quick map of what I could see. The rows were there. I could see the containers standing where row J should be. But the yellow post that marked row J's south entrance was gone. In its place was just snow and the end of row Y. I radioed the captain. "Captain, this is Brennan. Power is restored, generator down. I have a question about the container layout." "Go ahead." "Row J marker, I can't see it from the office. Is it still there?" Long pause. "You'll see it again when the sun comes up. Don't worry about it." "Copy." At dawn, I looked out the window again. The yellow row J marker was back in place at the south entrance, exactly where it had always been. I logged it. Row J marker not visible during blackout. Reappeared at dawn. No other anomalies observed. Captain Olesk read the log entry and said, "During blackouts, sometimes the layout shifts. You stay out of the rows like the protocol says, you'll be fine. The rows settle back when the power comes back. Shifts how? Not your concern. You followed the protocols, that's what matters." On the 50th night, I saw the woman in the blue coat for the third time. She stopped and turned to face me again. This time I counted to 20 with my eyes closed, and when I opened them, she was still there. She stood 30 yards away, facing me, her hands in her coat pockets. I could see her face now under the shadow of her hat. She was young, maybe 30, with pale skin and dark eyes that reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stood there watching me. I closed my eyes and counted to 20 again. When I opened them, she was gone. I radioed the captain immediately. The woman in the blue coat, I counted to 20 twice. She didn't disappear the first time. She disappeared the second time? Yes. Then the rule still works. If you have to count twice, you count twice. Log it and move on. I logged it. Woman in blue coat observed at 0341. Required 220 counts for disappearance. Subject made direct eye contact during first count. Disappeared during second count. On the 53rd night, container D-23 opened again. Captain Olesk arrived with his chain and padlock and secured it just like he'd done with I-47. "That's 2 containers now that need permanent locks," he said. "If a third one starts opening regularly, we'll need to have a different conversation about this job." On the 55th night, I heard knocking on the north gate that lasted 39 minutes, the longest yet. I sat in the office with the blinds down, listening to the steady rhythm. 3 knocks, 30 seconds of silence, 3 knocks. I logged the duration and reported it the next morning. Captain Olesk made a note in his small notebook and said nothing. On the 57th night, the footsteps circling the office reached 4 circuits before stopping. I radioed the captain immediately. "They stopped at 4? He asked. "Yes, 4 complete circuits. But not 5? "No." "Then you don't need me yet. But if they hit 5, you call me the second it happens." "What happens at 5 circuits?" "I come out and we secure the office from the inside until dawn. And you don't work here anymore after that night." The footsteps came again 2 nights later. They stopped at 4 circuits again. I logged it and hoped they wouldn't reach 5. On the 60th night, I found the final amendment. Captain Olesk met me at 11:30 with a yellow laminated sheet, just one entry labeled Amendment C1, effective immediately. C1. If you observe the man in the wrong vest a 4th time, do not avoid him. Walk directly toward him and stop when you are 10 feet away. He will speak to you. Listen to what he says, do not ask questions. When he has finished speaking, return to the office and radio the captain immediately with his exact words. This is mandatory. I looked up at Captain Olesk. Why do I have to approach him now? Before you said to walk away. Because 3 sightings is reconnaissance. 4 means he has something to tell you. If you walk away a 4th time, he'll stop following the rules. Captain Olesk folded his arms. The man in the wrong vest is part of the yard's history. He worked here a long time ago. He has his own rules now. When he shows himself 4 times to the same night patrol, it means there's something you need to know. What if I don't want to know? Then you quit before he shows himself a 4th time. But if you see him again and you walk away, he becomes something different, something that won't leave you alone even after you quit. So if you're staying, you follow C1, understood? Understood. On the 62nd night, I saw him for the 4th time. It was 4:27 in the morning. I was walking back to the office after my equipment shed check when I saw him standing in the middle of the perimeter road 50 yards ahead. He wore the same dark clothing and wrong vest. He stood facing me, his hands at his sides. I stopped and took a breath. I remembered C1 walked directly toward him and stop when you are 10 feet away. I walked toward him. My flashlight beam lit him up clearly. I could see his face now, weathered, maybe 50 years old, with a gray beard and eyes that looked tired. His vest had a logo I didn't recognize, a shield with crossed hammers and the letters LSFC. Lake Superior Freight Company, maybe. A company that didn't exist anymore. I stopped at 10 feet. He looked at me for a long moment, then spoke. His voice was quiet, rough, with an accent I couldn't place. 3 containers will open on the same night before the season ends. When that happens, do not try to close them. Radio the captain and stay in the office until dawn. Tell him row F, row G, and row H will open together. Tell him it's time to settle the account. He stopped speaking. I waited, but he said nothing else. I remembered the protocol. Do not ask questions. When he has finished speaking, return to the office and radio the captain immediately with his exact words. I turned and walked back to the office. When I looked over my shoulder, the man was gone. Inside the office, I wrote down his exact words in my notepad, then radioed the captain. It was 4:32 in the morning. Captain, this is Brennan. I had the 4th sighting. He spoke to me. Go ahead, exact words. I read from my notepad. 3 containers will open on the same night before the season ends. When that happens, do not try to close them. Radio the captain and stay in the office until dawn. Tell him row F, row G, and row H will open together. Tell him it's time to settle the account. Long silence on the radio. Then Captain Olesk's voice, very quiet. Acknowledged. Good work. Finish your shift normally. What does it mean? It means the season is almost over and there's something I need to handle before you finish. He didn't explain further. The next 5 nights were quiet. No anomalies, no open doors, no sightings. The routine held. I locked the gate at midnight. I walked my patrols. I checked the generator. I ignored the ice sounds. I returned to the office at 8 and handed over the keys. On the 68th night, it happened. I was doing my 3 a.m. interior patrol when I found the first door open. Container F08 in row F. The door hung open about 4 inches. I marked it and moved on per amendment A6. 10 minutes later, I found the second door, G34 in row G, open 6 inches. My stomach tightened. I marked it and continued. At 3:47, I found the third door, H29 in row H, open 8 inches. 3 containers open on the same night, row F, row G, row H. Just like the man in the wrong vest had said. I pulled out the radio. Captain, this is Brennan. 3 containers open simultaneously. F08, G34, H29, all 3 rows as specified. Do not close them. Return to the office immediately. Stay there until I arrive. Copy. I walked back to the office. Behind me, I heard sounds from the 3 rows. Scraping, footsteps, something heavy being dragged across metal. I didn't look back. I reached the office, locked the door, and sat at the desk. The sounds continued for 23 minutes. At 4:12, they stopped. At 4:37, I saw Captain Olesk's truck arrive through the office window. He parked and walked to rows F, G, and H with a large backpack slung over his shoulder. He spent 10 minutes at each row. I couldn't see what he was doing. At 5:18, he came to the office. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his face gray and drawn. He sat down across from me. The 3 containers are settled now, he said. They won't open again. The account is paid. What account? He looked at me for a long moment. This yard sits on old ground. Before Olesk Freight, there was Lake Superior Freight Company. Before that, there was something older. The containers in rows F, G, and H were part of a contract made a long time ago. A contract that required payment every few years. Tonight was the payment. Payment for what? For keeping this yard operational. For keeping the lake ice from coming up into the rows. for keeping row J from spreading into the other rows. He stood and pulled on his coat. The contract is renewed now. The containers are closed. The man in the wrong vest delivered the message like he always does, and I made the payment like I'm supposed to. That's all you need to know. What did you leave in the containers? He walked to the door and paused. Things that belong to the lake now. Things I was keeping in trust. He looked back at me. You've got 2 weeks left on your contract. You'll finish the season. After that, you're free to leave or stay for next year. If you stay, you'll get the full briefing on what this place really is. If you leave, you take your pay and you don't talk about what you saw here. Those are the terms. I understand. Good. Finish your shift. I'll see you tonight. He left. I sat in the office until sunrise, then logged the incident. 3 containers opened simultaneously per prediction. Captain Olesk responded and performed maintenance. Containers closed. No further action required. The final 2 weeks passed without major incident. The footsteps circling the office never reached 5 circuits. The woman in the blue coat appeared twice more, but she didn't turn to face me. Container doors stayed closed. The sounds from row J continued their nightly rhythm, but they didn't grow louder or spread to other rows. On my 75th night, I heard the knocking at the north gate for the last time. It lasted 42 minutes, a new record. But I sat in the office with the blinds down and waited it out like I'd been trained to do. On my 78th and final night, Captain Olesk met me at the office at 11:30 with my pay for the season. $9,600 in cash counted out in $100 bills on the desk. He also brought a folder with a single typed page inside. Your contract is complete, he said. You worked 78 nights without missing a shift, without breaking a rule, without getting yourself killed. That's better than most people who take this job. How many people have done this before me? 7 in the last 20 years. 3 finished the season. You're the 4th. He pushed the folder across the desk. That's an offer for next season. Same pay, same schedule, January through March. But if you come back, you'll be senior patrol. That means you train the new night guard and you handle situations I can't get to quickly. It also means you get the full briefing on what this place is and why the rules exist. I looked at the folder without opening it. And if I don't come back? Then you take your money, you drive home, and you forget you were ever here. You don't talk about the rules. You don't try to come back during off-season. You leave it alone and it leaves you alone. The man in the wrong vest, I said. What happens to him? He stays here. He's part of the place now. He died in row J in 1973 during a winter storm. He worked for Lake Superior Freight Company back when they operated this yard. He was trying to secure containers when the storm got bad and something came out of row J. He tried to run, but he didn't know the rules. Now he's bound to the yard, and he helps people like you by pointing out the things they need to avoid. And the woman in the blue coat? She walked into the lake from the waterfront in 1958. She drowned. The lake sent her back, but she's not the same as she was. She walks the fence line every night looking for the way back to the water. If you look at her face too long, she'll recognize you. And once she recognizes you, she'll wait for you outside the fence when you leave. That's why the rule says to close your eyes and count. I opened the folder and looked at the contract for next season. It was identical to the first one except for a single line at the bottom. Senior Night Patrol, full briefing included. I need time to think about it, I said. You have until November 1st to decide. If you want the job, call the number on the contract. If not, don't call and don't come back. He stood and shook my hand. You did good work, Brennan. Most people don't make it past the first month. You made it all the way through. That means something. I worked my final shift. I locked the gate at midnight. I walked my patrols. I checked the generator at 1:30, 3, and 5. I heard the ice sounds between 2:15 and 2:30. I walked past Row J without entering. I checked the equipment shed at 5. At 8 a.m., I unlocked the gate for the last time. Captain Olesk met me at the office. I handed him the keys and the radio. He gave me a firm nod. "Safe travels," he said. "And remember, if you come back next year, you'll be the one writing the rules for someone else." I drove away from the yard as the sun climbed over the lake. In my rearview mirror, the container rows stood in neat lines covered in snow, silent and still. The sodium lights had shut off with the sunrise. Everything looked ordinary, peaceful, like nothing strange had ever happened there. But I knew the truth. I knew what walked between those rows after dark. I knew what made the sounds from Row J. I knew what stood at the north gate and knocked with slow, deliberate rhythm. I knew the rules existed for a reason, and I knew that following them was the only thing that had kept me alive. I drove back to Duluth with $9,600 in my backpack and a contract for next season folded in my pocket. I thought about my brother and his debts. I thought about the woman in the blue coat walking the fence line every night. I thought about the man in the wrong vest standing in the snow, pointing at the places I needed to avoid. I thought about the rules. By the time I reached the city limits, I knew I would call the number in November. I would come back for another season. Not because I needed the money anymore, but because I understood something now that I hadn't understood before. Some places have rules that keep the darkness contained, and some people are built to follow those rules no matter what walks in the shadows. I was one of those people. I had proven it over 78 nights in the cold and the dark. I would go back. I would train the next night patrol. I would teach them the rules the way Captain Olesk had taught me. And I would help keep the containers secure, the gates locked, and the things in Row J from spreading into the world beyond the fence, because that's what the job required. That's what the rules demanded, and I was good at following rules.